Hello, dear listener. Please subscribe to our channel. Enjoy watching. Every person you trust, you hand them a knife. It can either protect you or destroy you. I sat there, holding a photograph of me with my wife in my hands, and this quote kept running through my mind. I can't remember who wrote it. Some writer, perhaps, but it stuck with me from many years ago, even though I didn't give it much importance back then and even forgot about it for a while. But now, after an unpleasant incident happened to me, I deeply and fully understood its meaning. For as long as I can remember, I've always been trusting and kind-hearted. I believed in the goodness of people, despite witnessing how cruel and cynical they can be. This belief blinded me so much that I couldn't see the deception right under my nose. This happened about a year ago. I remember driving home from work on a warm and nearly windless day in May. Despite the gentle breeze, I felt a draft coming through the open car window. As I drove through the streets, I occasionally noticed pedestrians, each lost in their own world, some deep in thought, others chatting on their phones, and some waiting at bus stops, watching for buses to arrive. When I turned into an uncrowded populated alley, mostly lined with trash bins and the sidewall of a factory, I noticed a person lying on the ground among the scattered garbage near one of the bins, bleeding profusely. He weakly moved his hand, attempting to signal that he was still alive and in need of help. I hit the brakes and got out of the car. Approaching cautiously, I examined him closely, noticing numerous bruises on his body and 2 stab wounds on his side. The man moaned softly and I crouched down, trying to hear him speak. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked him, but he only groaned again in response. So, I circled around and tried to lift him to carry him to my car, intending to rush him to the nearest hospital. As I pulled him, he groaned even louder. The pain must have been excruciating. "Hang in there, buddy. We're getting you help. We'll be at the hospital soon. Just hold on," I reassured him, placing him in the back seat. I quickly found a towel under the seat, which I always kept handy, and applied it to his wound. "Meticulously, hold this. Let's press as hard as you can." I didn't know what had happened to him, but I couldn't just leave him there bleeding. Soon, I was driving toward the hospital, occasionally trying to engage him in conversation through the mirror, but he remained unresponsive, only groaning. I genuinely felt sorry for him. No one deserves such a fate. When I finally parked in front of the hospital entrance, I shouted for help and, not waiting for paramedics, began pulling him out of the car. His blood had significantly stained my car seat during the ride, but at that moment, I paid no attention to it. My priority was to assist the injured man. Medical personnel quickly arrived and took him from my hands, placing him on a stretcher. A doctor met them in the hospital lobby and immediately began examining him. Meanwhile, one of the nurses detained me to answer a few questions and fill out a form, even though I had no idea who the man was. She asked me to provide my contact information, explaining that the injuries on the man I brought in indicated a crime, and they might need to get in touch with me or involve the police. While I didn't want to get further involved, I still complied with her request. It seemed sufficient to me that I had already delivered him into the capable hands of the doctors who would continue to care for his life. As it later turned out, this man had no identification on him, and after the surgery, he remained unconscious for a couple of days. During this time, the police contacted me and questioned me about the incident. I shared everything that had happened, not knowing how else I could be of assistance, but for some reason, they asked me not to leave town for the time being. I agreed, as I had no immediate plans to go anywhere. However, the piercing look from the police officer who questioned me seemed slightly suspicious and unsettling. No, I didn't think they would try to pin everything on me, and why would they, but just in case. I searched among my old records for contact information of a good lawyer a friend had recommended to me. After the police visit, I received a call from the hospital. The nurse informed me that the man I had brought in had regained consciousness and was eager to speak with me. He wanted to thank me and look his rescuer in the eyes. At first, I hesitated, citing being busy and such, but the nurse insisted, and I agreed to visit him. "Where are you heading so late?" my wife asked as I got ready to leave for the hospital. "Oh, the hospital called? They wanted me to come over." "Don't lie. Haven't you had enough trouble with the police? What do they want from you again?" "The guy I helped wants to see me. I thought I'd pay a visit to the person I saved." "Do you want to come along?" "No, I don't feel like going anywhere. I'm a bit tired after the day, but you go if you want. I'll maybe take him some fruit. I'll just go and come back right away." I kissed my wife and left the house. Soon enough, I found myself back at the same hospital. At the nurse's station, I identified myself and asked which room my rescued acquaintance was in. The nurse promptly provided me with the room number and even escorted me there while giving me an update on his condition. When I entered the room, I saw a man in his mid-30s lying on the bed, his torso bandaged, and a few band-aids on his face. On the way, the nurse had told me that fortunately, his wounds weren't as deep as they initially thought, and they managed to save him despite significant blood loss. I felt a sense of satisfaction for having helped him, and was now eager to inquire about his well-being and learn more about who he was, and how he had ended up in such a situation. "Is this him?" the patient asked the nurse when she nodded, and he greeted me. "Oh, it's nice to see you. I'm Michael Barbara. I'd like to thank you. I'm sorry for causing you any inconvenience. I was glad to help. My name is Adam. She's fine and Walker. How are you feeling?" "Thank you. I'm much better now. It's just that the nurses keep poking me with needles. Tell me, Adam, how can I repay you? I won't be here forever, and when I leave, I'd like to somehow express my gratitude to you. No need for that. I'm glad you're feeling better. Have the police been here? They've been pestering me hoping I might know you in some way as they couldn't find any identification on you." "Yes, they came this morning. One of them was quite unpleasant. I've already told them everything he said, apparently noticing my inquisitive look, and continued. But you, I suppose, would also like to know what happened to me, right? Well, it's not really my business. I'm just glad I could help. Wait a minute. I'd like to share my sad story with you." "You have the right to know," he insisted, and Michael began to recount how he lived with his mother in a poor neighborhood. He had recently found a job as a laborer at the market, closer to home. Since his mother had fallen ill and he needed money for her medication, he had borrowed some money from acquaintances. However, when he received his paycheck and went to repay the debt, they demanded repayment with exorbitant interest. He didn't have that kind of money, and when the time came for the next payment, they demanded even more. So, he started arguing with them, and they beat him severely, stabbing him several times before tossing him aside, leaving him to die. That's when I found him injured near the dumpster in a remote alley that day. His story saddened me, and I found myself wondering why the world could be so unjust to some people, especially someone who was just trying to help his sick mother. I felt even more sorry for him and wanted to visit him a few more times. I had grown up in a poor family myself, and I understood how tough it must be for him. I offered to partially cover his medical expenses since he didn't have insurance. "You're so kind to me. I don't know how to thank you. If you want, when I get out, I can work for you. I can do a lot of things. I promise. You won't regret it," he pleaded. "Just focus on getting better." "Michael, we'll see about that later," I replied. My conversation with him reminded me of dialogues from English novels between gentlemen. He was so courteous and tried to ingratiate himself, to the point where his speech seemed... I arrived home late in the evening. My wife, Dolores, was already waiting for me with dinner. I could smell the aroma of her signature dish as soon as I walked in, and she greeted me almost at the doorstep. "Why did you take so long?" she asked when I entered. I came as soon as I could. Is it a special occasion?" "It smells delicious." "No, not really. We received some humanitarian aid today, and there was a lot of meat. They allowed each employee to take some home because today was one of those rare occasions when the food wouldn't fit in our refrigerators. So, I decided to cook a dish." "How's that man doing? Is he better?" she continued to inquire. "Yes, he's improving. I met him today. Poor guy, he has such a sad story," I replied. "What happened to him?" I briefly recounted his story to my wife, and she empathetically clasped her hands. "Oh dear, he's truly a poor soul," she said. "Thus, I felt sorry for him too. I just don't understand why you agreed to pay for his medical treatment. We don't have that much money. You could have contacted a volunteer organization like ours, and they would have helped him." "Don't be like that," I interrupted her. "We have enough. And that man nearly died trying to help his sick mother. But we have our son's education to think about. We need to support him, and we were planning to do some repairs this year." "Did you forget?" she replied. "Why are you being so stingy?" he asked. "I'm gonna go wash up. You start setting the table. I'll be right back." Dolores went into the kitchen, and I headed towards the bathroom, stopping by the bedroom to take off my jacket and put on a light t-shirt. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket, and when I took it out, I saw that the battery was almost dead. There my wife's phone was already lying. I checked that it was fully charged and unplugged the charger. As I connected my phone, a message arrived on my wife's phone. Pics on the lock screen. I caught a glimpse of the phrase, "Sorry for the missed meeting." Strange message. Who's Amors? I thought, as I didn't know anyone among Dolores' acquaintances whose name started with M, my hand instinctively reached for her phone again, wanting to read the message one more time just to make sure I hadn't misread it. But the phone was locked. That also struck me as odd because my wife had never used a lock on her phone before. Someone messaged you, I said as I returned to the kitchen, holding her phone. I'm holding her phone. Oh, thanks for bringing it. She took the phone and started going through the messages. Why are you keeping something from me? He asked. What? She replied, momentarily pausing her reading. Why did you start using a lock? Do you have secrets from me? I repeated my question. Oh no! What are you talking about? It's just that sometimes at work, I leave my phone to charge, or I forget it in my coat. So my colleagues recommended that I put a lock on it so that no one can snoop around. You know, it's just basic security for my personal information. I wouldn't want just anyone going through my photos, she explained. Her explanation seemed logical to me. And who's Am? I continued to inquire. What Am? She asked. Oh, don't pretend. I saw the message was from Am at... Oh, that's my colleague. Marie. She recently joined our team. Really? Why did you need to meet up? Dolores seemed to realize that I had read the entire message, and her eyes darted around the kitchen as she searched for answers. She even stumbled over her words a bit, but I couldn't understand why. What could be so secretive about meeting a friend? Well, see, we just wanted to meet up for some shopping. But yeah, I suggested we go shopping together. But she never showed up. That's all. Why are you interrogating me like this? I just asked. Let's see. Did Derek call? He was supposed to call today, right? Yes, he called. Just when you were at the hospital. Everything's fine with him. He said he'll come visit during the holidays. He still has some exams to take, and then he'll come home. Dolores told me during dinner. I was relieved to hear that our son was doing well, and I couldn't wait for the holidays when he would be able to visit us. A couple of weeks later, Michael called me and said that he was being discharged from the hospital. I had visited him several times during his stay, and we had become somewhat friends. He turned out to be quite friendly and pleasant to talk to. After the visits, I would come home and share the news with my wife. She was happy that my new friend was on the mend, but sometimes I noticed that she was sad and even a little nervous, as if she was in some kind of trouble. But when I asked her what was wrong, she would avoid answering and say that she was just tired at work. I realized that volunteering wasn't always easy, and I tried to support her as much as I could. She decided to choose this job a couple of years ago when she saw how many people in need there are in the world. I was in the world. In the meantime, Michael had persuaded me to give him some work. He wanted to thank me so much, and I thought I could do something to help, so I decided to offer him some work in the garden, especially since I hadn't had time to do it lately. He gladly accepted my offer and said that he would watch every leaf. And when I came to see him on the day of his discharge, I informed my wife about the arrival of the future employee and asked her to prepare a guest room for him on the first floor, and to prepare more food. But what struck me the most was that when we arrived home and I introduced my friend's wife to her, she suddenly felt sick and fainted. That was part 1 of a great story. Be sure to check out part 2. It will be in the next clip today. It's going to be very interesting. Now let's hear another story about a man who caught his wife cheating with her therapist. It was a great revenge. Let's move on. Because around 4 days ago, my wife revealed that she had been engaged in an affair with her therapist for the past 7 months. There's actually more to the background story that I wanted to share, but if there's interest, I could post the full details on a blog or something similar. About 3 months ago, she distanced herself from me and claimed that I no longer deserved closeness, stating that I had to earn it back. This led to a complete lack of closeness in our relationship, leaving our bedroom life completely dormant. As time went on, I tried to communicate with her and address the issues we were facing. I was deprived of emotional and physical connection, support around the house, and basically any effort she used to put into our relationship or household. It felt like a betrayal, and I was convinced that there was more to the situation. However, every time I confronted her, she would dismiss my concerns, evade my questions, and alter the facts. I consistently asked her to be open and honest with me so that we could work through our issues together. However, it seemed like I was overwhelming her. She never seemed to have time for me and always prioritized other things over our relationship. Then she made plans to attend a women's empowerment event that was exclusively for females. Deep down, I already knew what was really going on. She had come up with a cover story that she knew I wouldn't argue with. I couldn't sleep, so I ended up snooping. So, through her accounts again, I noticed a suspicious number and decided to give it a call. As expected, the name on the voicemail belonged to none other than her therapist. I did a background search and found out that he lived in the same town where she booked the hotel. Then, on the second night of her trip, I checked her search history and made a timeline of our conversations compared to her really disturbing search results and other things I discovered. All my fears were confirmed, and it was even worse than I had imagined. She was looking up information on what happens to marriages when your therapist is involved, how to gather evidence for a divorce, and even how to hide assets during a divorce. She was also stalking him and his family, running background checks on them, researching how to deceive someone online, and even wondering if a therapist could lose their license for being too close to a client. The list of things she was researching just kept going on and on. She was Googling this guy almost every day. The proof was clear. She's completely obsessed with him and was stalking him. Everything started to make sense, and I knew exactly what was happening. On Sunday morning, I sent her a text message where I laid out everything I knew about what was going on. I directly mentioned the person she was involved with, and told her that if she wanted to salvage our relationship, she had to confess. Surprisingly, she came back on Sunday, a day earlier than expected. She insisted on knowing the source of the information, but I refused to disclose it and stood my ground. I didn't want to give her the chance to confuse, manipulate, deny, or rationalize any of the evidence. Eventually, she confessed everything. She provided detailed descriptions of their closeness. I feel disgusted. I'm horrified. However, for some reason, I can't help but consider the idea of having an open relationship. Maybe it could be exciting. After spending several intense hours listening to her and hearing all the details, the more I think about it, the more absurd and insane it all sounds. It turns out her therapist is the leader of a group of men who have these secretive male empowerment sessions in the woods. They're not allowed to talk about what happens there. Instead of my wife attending a female version of this, she goes to the graduation ceremony of the male session. During this ceremony, each guy goes on stage and shares his emotional story, and then their family members come up to give testimonials about how their lives have improved since joining this group, which is starting to sound like a cult. By the way, there's even a little girl who goes on stage and says, "My daddy is different now. I like him better." So here's what went down. Sure, my wife, without knowing it, happens to sit next to the big shot leader of the group. This leader guy leans over to the person in front of them and says, "If only there was a female version of this group." And guess what? My wife seizes the opportunity and goes, "Oh, there is actually..." In fact, I skipped the session this week to support my affair partner here today. The leader guy is like, "Oh, really? Would you mind speaking about it and sharing some info with everyone?" And just like that, they put her on stage to talk about this supposed women's empowerment session that she has never even attended before. I might just be overly suspicious, but now I have this gut feeling that her therapist is recruiting vulnerable women for this organization and manipulating them for his own physical advantage. I don't have solid proof of this, though. Honestly, I am completely lost. On one hand, I'm deeply disturbed and upset by my wife's actions. Just on the other hand, I believe she was taken advantage of, manipulated, and coached by her therapist. And I could report him to the board and have his license revoked. But here's the thing, my wife doesn't want me to do that. She says it would make her miserable to know that she was the reason his life fell apart. Instead, she wants us to have an open marriage and talks about engaging in a three-way and exploring exciting and interesting forms of closeness. And while she was able to seduce me when she returned, and things were pretty good in that department, man, I had one of those nights where sleep was a long-lost friend. Oh, come John. I was completely drained, but I knew it had to be done. I didn't waste any time. I started shoving all of my wife's stuff into trash bags. Every little thing that she left in our house, every reminder of her, was bagged up. I chucked those bags right onto the curb, and let me tell you, I felt a strange sense of freedom. It was like I was taking back control of my space, my life. When my wife saw her stuff on the street, she lost it. She started screaming at the top of her lungs, making a scene for the whole neighborhood. But I didn't care. As soon as she stepped foot onto the street, I just closed the door without even a backward glance. She knocked on the door for a solid 30 minutes, but I didn't open it. After a while, she just left. As soon as I saw her leave, I changed the locks real quick so she wouldn't be able to get back into the house. My space was mine again, and I intended to keep it that way. At the same time, I started the process of exposing her Dr. Shady behavior. I knew for a fact she'd be furious, but it was a necessary move. This chap wasn't just crossing professional boundaries, he was blatantly breaking the law. Just a few days later, the dude my wife cheated with got his license yanked. Talk about karma coming back to bite him. His career took a major hit and was pretty much trashed. He was fuming mad, so much so that he went ahead and threatened my wife, swearing to turn her life upside down and ruin her good name. I was freaking out. She was so afraid of the mess she made and of the therapist too. Just with tears in her eyes, she turned to me for help. She reminded me that I made a promise once, a promise to protect my family, but I couldn't help but laugh in her face. I made it clear that I had no intention of rescuing her from this mess she brewed. I even told her she wasn't my family anymore after what she did. She was left all on her own, struggling to clean up the mess she made. I won't lie, seeing her struggle gave me a weird sense of satisfaction. It felt like payback, watching her deal with the same crap she put me through. The next weeks were crazy, with her incessantly ringing me, pleading for me to return, trying to pretend as if all was fine and dandy. But her voice, which used to calm me down, now just got on my nerves. I was done with her lies, and her manipulations. There's something incredibly freeing about letting go, getting your life back from toxic people. Mentioned in all the chaos, I found peace, a newfound respect for myself, and more nights of tossing and turning. The nightmares and perpetual doubts subsided, replaced by a serene sense of satisfaction. She prioritized her desires over our bond, over my sentiments. I'll be that commissions she's getting a taste of her own medicine. I didn't feel a twinge of remorse or guilt. I'd extended her an opportunity to come clean, to mend what was broken. But she decided to lie and double-cross me, but now she was on her own, battling the tempest she had triggered. And for the first time, I wasn't there to shield her. We have another story about a guy who accidentally finds out that his girlfriend is dating another guy at the same time. Here we go. I caught her. I had been in a relationship with a girl for 6 months, and we'd gone on several small trips together. It was not just a casual fling, but a serious commitment. One evening, we had plans to spend time together, but she canceled last minute due to a sudden family dinner. She called me from the restaurant's bathroom, claiming to be there with her family because it's considered impolite to talk on the phone in a restaurant, except inside the women's bathroom. She apologized and promised to call me later that night once she returned home from dinner. That night, she didn't call me as promised, so I decided to call her. However, she didn't answer. The next morning, I received an early morning call from her phone, so I answered. It was a guy on the other end, asking who I was. Confused. I asked him the same question, and he revealed that he's her boyfriend. He had just discovered that she was dating someone else. According to him, they had been in a relationship for a year, but he'd been occupied with his business and hadn't been able to see her for the past few months. Supposedly, they had gone out for dinner the previous night, and then checked into a hotel. While she was showering that night, he noticed her phone ringing and saw that it was a guy's name. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to snoop through her phone, discovering all the pictures of us together and the exchanged emails. He kept it to himself and waited until the morning when she was still asleep to call me and confront the situation. I was extremely surprised, so I told him he could have her and that she was worthless. He responded saying he just wanted to make sure I was done with her. She called me on the phone, crying and apologizing, promising to explain later. I told her to go away and used all sorts of terrible words. I'd never been so harsh with anyone before, or since with the things I said. It felt satisfying, and even more satisfying when she started breaking down. Felt like I deserved her more, and she claimed she had already ended things with him and begged me to take her back. I demanded evidence that she had truly ended it with him. She provided the proof, and we reconciled. However, the guy then started stalking her and sending threatening emails and texts. The police got involved, and he backed off. A few months later, she moved to another country under the pretense of studying abroad, but it was actually to spend time with a guy she had been chatting with on MySpace. That's when I finally ended the relationship. It was a tough year for me, but I learned a lot. I cringe when I think about the time I wasted with her, especially when I tried to change her after we got back together. She had a boyfriend from before she met me, and I was being fooled. She claimed she realized she liked me more at some point, but then why did she go back to the other guy? The answer is, she was a deceitful and unfaithful person. Since then, she has gained weight, lost her attractiveness, and overall transformed from cute to unappealing. I definitely feel like I came out on top in the end. It's important for us and will help promote this video. Thank you for watching us.